Now that you've set up created at and updated at properties for each note, in this one, we are going to actually use those to do more than display a little message. What we're going to do is figure out how we can wire up this dropdown. We're going to actually sort by those 3 categories depending on which one they pick. Now, if you remember, we had already set up the options under the select tag. We have by edited, by created, and alphabetical. Now we're going to have by edited be the default value, and we're actually going to store the value, one of these 3, inside of the Notes app file under the filters object. It's not really a filter, it's more of a way to sort, but this is a pretty good place to store it. Right here, sort by, and we're going to set this equal to a string, and we'll have a default value of by edited. Now we're going to go ahead and actually respond to changes in that filter as well. So down below, we do already have a change listener for filter by. In here, we're no longer going to do what we do now, which is to just print something. Instead, we're going to do something similar to what we do up above. I am going to change the filters and re-render the notes list. So let's go ahead and get that done right here. Filters.sortBy equals, it's going to equal e.target.value. That's where the value lives. Then down below, I'm going to call render notes, and I'm going to pass in the 2 arguments it expects. We are going to pass in notes, and we're going to pass in the filters. So this is actually all we need to do for the HTML file and for the Notes app file. Everything else is going to be inside of render notes itself. It's getting the correct information. Now it's up to render notes to actually do a bit of sorting. Now we're not going to put all of the sorting code in render notes itself. That would create a function that is really, really big. What we're going to do is create another function and have render notes call it. We're going to create something along the lines of the following. Right here, a const sort notes. Sort notes will be a function. I'm going to leave a little comment up top. Sort your notes by one of 3 ways. Perfect. So sort notes is going to get called in render notes, keeping render notes nice and small, and we'll abstract all of the sorting logic away into this function. Down below, we could start off render notes by saying, let's go ahead and set notes equal to whatever comes back from calling sort notes. I'm going to call sort notes with notes itself, and I'm going to call it not with all of the filters, but just with the one it actually needs. So right here, filters.sort by. I'm going to make sure that gets passed correctly into the sort notes function. Now sort notes gets the notes, and it gets sort by, and all we need to do in here is use what we learned about array sorting to allow us to sort by those 3 types. We're going to set up an if statement figuring out which way we should sort, and then for each way, we'll set up the actual array method sort call. Let's go ahead and start off with an if statement. We're going to check if sort by equals, and in this case, the first one would be by edited. So that's the first case we'll handle. If sort by is by edited, we're going to return, and we're just going to call notes.sort, the sort array method we used previously. Now, if you remember, the sort array method worked a bit different than our other array methods. It does take a callback function, but the callback function doesn't get called one time for every item like we would see with other methods such as filter or such as for each. In this case, the sort callback function gets called with A and B, 2 items from the list, and it's up to us to figure out which one of those should come first. If A should come before B, then -1 gets returned. If B should come before A, we return 1. If both are the same, we return 0. So let's go ahead and kick things off. First up, if. I'm going to check if A.updated at is greater than B.updated at. Now remember, we're working with timestamps, which are just numbers. So is the number for A bigger than the number for B? If so, that means A is more recent. So it was more recently updated, and we want that one to be first. So I'm going to return -1. Next up, we can add an else if. In this case, we're going to do the opposite. So we're going to check if A.updated at is less than B.updated at. And since we're working with timestamps, that would be us checking if A, the timestamp happened after the one for B, because things in the past are smaller numbers, things in the future are bigger numbers. So right here, all we have to do is return 1. And for good measure, else, if they are equal, we'll just return 0. If both of the values are identical, then we'll return 0, saying that one doesn't necessarily belong before or after another. And there we have it. This should be everything we need to wire up the by edited sorting. Now remember, we don't have the other cases set up just yet. So to keep things working, what I'm going to do is just add an else clause. If you're not trying to sort by edited, we do not have support for it yet. So I'm just going to return the notes array unsorted. Let's go ahead and save the file and see what happens. I'm going to give the browser a refresh. Over here, we have sort by last edited showing up as the value. Let me crack open the DevTools real quick. And what we're going to work on is we're going to figure out if editing an item actually does bring it to the top of the list. And we're going to need 2 windows to see this live. So what I'm going to do for the rest of this one is make this window really, really tiny. And then I'm going to duplicate this tab. And I'm going to create a second window. Over here, we'll do some of the editing of the notes. Over here, we'll just watch the list and make sure it sorts correctly. So I'm going to make a new note, and by default, we can see it shows up top, which is correct. That note was created after this one, so its updated at value is going to be more recent. Now we can go ahead and actually try to update the my title note and make sure that comes first after it's been updated. So right here, I'm going to go to my title. I'm just going to update anything. I can just delete all of the body text, for example, and we can see that it does bring it to the top of the list. So everything is working really well. If I were to go back there and give a name to the untitled note, some title, I can see that shows up at the top. So far, all is well. We can continue on working on the other 2 ways we're going to be sorting. The next one is sorting by the created at property. Setting up that sorting is going to be your challenge. So you're going to need to create an if statement that matches by created. Over here, you're going to set up the sorting correctly, adding an else if onto our current set of if statements. So take some time, knock that one out, and then test your work. When you switch over to by created, you should always see the notes in the order they were created at, regardless of which one was edited last. Pause the video, knock that out, test your work, and when you're done, come back and click play, and we'll move through it together. How'd you do? Let's go ahead and kick things off. What I'm going to do right here is add on an else if. So else if our condition, our curly braces for the code block. Now the condition for this one is going to be another check of sort by. I want to check sort by. I'm going to check if it equals, and here we're looking for the value we used inside of our option. This was by created. So right here, by created. When we see by created, we are once again going to return notes.sort, but we're going to be sorting in a different way. Let's go ahead and knock that out. We're going to set up the function. We're going to set up A and B, and then we're going to go ahead and actually set up the conditions to check the created at properties. So first up, if a.created at is greater than b.created at, then A is more recent, and we're going to go ahead and have that come first, return -1. We can set up our else if right here, else if A.created at is less than B.created at, meaning that B should come first. In that case, we return 1. And last up, else if they are the same, if one's not greater than the other, we return 0. And that should be all we have to do for that feature. If I head over to the browser, we can actually test this out. I have my one window right here, and in the background, I have my other. All I'm going to do is keep things in sorting by last edited, and I'm going to edit my title. When I do so, it moves up the list since it was the most recently updated. If I switch over to the other one though, sort by recently created, we can see it moves down to the bottom where it belongs because some title was more recently created. My title was the first note out of these 2. So there we go. We have our second sorting technique in place. The last one that we're going to set up is sorting alphabetically. I'm going to go ahead and grab alphabetical, bring it over to the notes functions file, and we're going to set up that last one right here, else if sort by equals the string alphabetical, make sure to toss it in quotes, If it does, we're going to set up our curly braces. This is the code to run. What are we going to do? Once again, we're just going to be using notes.sort like we've done before. Return notes.sort. We got our function. We're going to have our two arguments, A and B, and then we're going to set up the actual checks. Let's set up our if statement. If, right here, a.title, and we're going to use .to lowercase to perform a case insensitive sorting. If A comes before B, so if it's less than B, .title, .to lowercase, what are we going to go ahead and do? We are going to go ahead and return -1, making sure A shows up first. Now we can add an else if A.title.to lowercase is after B.title.to lowercase, then we can go ahead and set up this else if to do what? To return 1, making sure that B comes first. Last up, if they're the same, else we return 0. Awesome. So there we have it. We have all of our sorting in place. Now later in the course, when we learn other techniques, we can simplify this a little bit. Right now, it's a little verbose, but that's okay. We have a really good setup. And if we go ahead and save things, we can test our work. So in this situation, we have, if we sort by something like last edited, actually, let's do recently created. We have some title coming up first, which is correct, and my title coming up second. If I switch this over to sort alphabetically, my title comes up first, which is great. If I pull up the second window that's sitting in the background, we can go ahead and test this out further. I'm going to change my title over to something like Z, and I can see it does come last since Z is after S. So there we go. We have sorting in place, and we are now done the basic version of the Notes application. There are no longer buttons or inputs or features that aren't wired up to actually do something meaningful. With this in place, we are done with our little discussion on dates, and we're actually done with this section. We have the basic version of both of our applications in place. Don't worry, as there is still plenty of course left. I'm very excited to continue on. We're going to continue learning more about JavaScript in the next section. So stay tuned for the section intro, which is coming up next.